So we had to do all this tests. And then the person who did the test, the doctor who did the test, he said, I would recommend that at a wellness checkup, do an annual physical, which is something which back home we don't have or we don't do.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one thing that stuck with me. So in the following year, I did my actual annual checkup, 2008 and 2008, 2009. I can't remember the exact date, but I know I moved to a 4-year college in 2009. And I used to have these frequent headaches, and I could not understand why. Now, as someone who was interested in the healthcare profession, my initial thought was, oops, do I have a brain tumor? And I was like, no, I haven't done my annual physical for the year yet. How about I go do it?
Yeah.
So I did go do it. And then they found out I had low blood sugar. So my primary care at the time was, well, just have like candy bars, ready to eat when you feel like your sugar is low, or eat it, ready to eat when you feel like your sugar is low, or eat it 2 to 3 hours after your meal so your sugar doesn't drop too low before you get to eat it. So now as a young person back then, excited about the past, you just, eat candy because, hey, it's the doctor said it. So that's what I did. But I found out it wasn't helping me because I would eat maybe breakfast or lunch. Then 2 hours later, I'm looking forward to eating the candy so I don't have the headache. But then the thing I later learned about chocolate, especially if it's not dark chocolate, is that it raises your blood sugar and then it drops. So you have the sugar high and then you have the sugar crash. Now, because I did not want to feel that sugar crash, I kept eating candy until it was time to eat my next meal. So I wasn't, and it was kind of affecting my school because I can't study if I have a headache or if I'm having a sugar crash. So I said, okay, there's got to be a way out of this. How can I manage my blood sugar without, having this whole run-around with candy?
Yeah.
So back then, a Google search, they were like, you have to do a sugar detox and blah, blah, blah. So I did one, which was, to fade off the candies and increase my food intake.
Yeah.
So I came across a research. Well, it wasn't scientific. Back then, I wasn't, going based off of scientific research. I was just going off of something that could help me at the moment. So I came across a lot of personal stories of, getting rid of candies and increasing food intake. So I did that for like a weekend, and to say that the detox was crazy, it was crazy. But I was able to fade that out and increase food intake. So that sort of helped me manage my blood sugar. So the following year, I did my annual physical again, and the annual physical this time included an annual pap smear, annual women wellness, which involves your pap smear and all of that. So the results came back that I had abnormal pap smear. And the next step was to do a biopsy. So when they did a biopsy, the doctor, the GYN who did it, he gave me a pamphlet that on the cover page, it was like a trial medication that was going on for women who could either have abnormal pap and were possibly diagnosed with cervical cancer or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And the ingredients of that trial drug were like cruciferous vegetables like cabbage, kale, and all of that. So the doctor was like, review this while we're waiting for your results. So in my mind, that was scary because I'm like, what? In my late teens, and I'm getting a diagnosis of possible cancer. So with that information, I went on to do my research about the benefits of, cruciferous vegetables. And I said to myself, well, hey, what's the worst that could happen if I start including these foods in my diet? At least it would put me at a better chance of healing or getting better if in case that turned out positive for whatever they were looking for.
Yeah.
So at this point, I didn't tell anybody about it because my family is a bunch of healthcare providers, and I was struggling to deal with that information, and I wasn't ready to receive other inputs. So I was like, okay, let me wait for the results. If it's positive, then I can decide how to share it, right? And say that is a possibility. And then I'm already scared. And then hearing from other people will be more scary. So long story short, results came back negative. But because I had an abnormal pap, the recommendations back then, I don't know if it's still the same now. The recommendations back then is if you have an abnormal pap, you have to do it every year for the next 3 years. And then if they all come back normal, then you go back to doing there was every other year or
every other year. Yeah.
Yes. So when it came back, I did it 3 years, it came back negative. So I was cleared to go for 3 years without doing it. But then I started so because of that experience, I became more in tune with my health or with my body. So if something wasn't feeling right, then I become curious. I was almost like, what's the word? I was ready to Google anything, any symptom, but then it wasn't doing me any good because I'll be
hypochondriac.
Yeah,
that's me right there.
So I had to, like I said, I did psychology undergrad, so learning about the mind kind of helped me deal with the whole thing. Sometimes I would tell myself, well, maybe it's all in my mind or maybe it's not. So the next symptom I noticed in 2012-ish, that's the year I moved out of state to grad school. I started to notice that my lower abdomen would be distended. I'll easily get bloated and all whatnot. So I would Google it, and what I came across was, well, the foods you're eating is making you gassy, your hormones are all over the place, you're in childbearing age, blah, blah, blah. But then I went for my annual that year, and then my doctor recommended an ultrasound. So that was 2014. The results came out. She was like, oh, you have fibroids, but you don't have to do anything about it. So now I remember my mom had it and she had surgery for it. So when she said that word, it was almost like I went into a trance. But then she made it sound like it wasn't a big deal. But I'm sitting there like, why don't I have to not do anything about it? Because my knowledge about fibroids prior to then was that it only happened in women 50 or 60 and older. It wasn't a young person thing. So I had all these thoughts running through my mind, and I asked her, like, what is there any reason why I had it so young? I'm like, what, early 20s? And she said, oh no. And then she walked away. And then she came back and she was like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm not. She said, okay, what is your fear? Now, in my mind, my initial thought was, like you mentioned, the story is that if you have fibroids, you can't have kids.
Yeah.
But that was what I was feeling, but I didn't say it. And then she pulled the chair and then she sat down and then she said, are you scared that you might not be able to have kids? I said, yeah. And then I started tearing up. And she's like, oh, no, you're fine. Women carry kids with fibroids. They choose to take it out and still get pregnant. But she didn't make it, she made it sound like it was, it won't bother me if I don't bother it. Pretty much that's what she said. So I left the office with the paper. That was the first time I started requesting from my physical results and all of that because I wanted to keep track. So I got into my car and I sat there for cried a little bit. Then I drove home.